It says, radiate positivity.
And that is the positivity, sis.
We're such dorks.
Okay. And
it's Tuesday. It is episode 15. Welcome back. Welcome to the episode that I know is going to get me in trouble, but that's okay. I can handle a little bit of trouble. And I don't apologize for it. So today's episode I have titled Evangelical Trauma, which is also known as church hurt. So I have a story of my own that has led me to this phrase of evangelical trauma. It is intertwined, but is also separate from, not to be confused with, my relationship with Jesus. While the church, the organized religion side of it does affect and can affect my relationship with Jesus, it is also separate from it. Like, my relationship with Jesus Christ is there. Ain't nobody taking that from me. Okay? But the crap that comes along with evangelical trauma and organized church, organized religion side, I felt like it's something that I needed to talk about. One, because it is such a part of my story, but number two, because I have many friends who are who don't go to church. Plain and simple. Even outside of the COVID, not going because of COVID, that's a get out of jail free card. But people who either don't believe, they don't believe in this Jesus, this God that I speak of at all, or they went as a young adult and were traumatized by it, were hurt by it, saw some things they should have never seen, or plain and simple, they just have no desire to have anything to do with organized religion. So I have lots of friends in different pockets of my life that are in those categories, and that's fine. Like, they know where I am. They know where I sit in my faith, and we can still have conversation even though we may disagree. Like, because here's a fun tip, everybody. We can disagree and still be civil human beings. Yeah, it can happen. But especially in this last year where we've watched the pandemic, we've watched political discussions escalate and get down to, well, who, this God you believe in, or the church is XYZ because of this, that, and the other. Like, whoa, like, we got to talk about this. Like, we have to talk about this. And so that's what we're going to do. That's what we're going to do today. I'll start with my story. So as I was trying to, chronologically figure this out, I initially would have said that I can see my evangelical trauma started about 10 years ago. But as I was really digging in, I actually realized it goes much further back than that. So if you remember in the episode about my childhood trauma, when I talked about that, I mentioned about my birth mother that I can remember, as far back as I can remember, we just went to every church known to man. Like, it depended on either who she was dating at the time or who we were around at the time, whether we went to the Nazarene church or the Catholic church or the Episcopalian church or the Baptist. Like, it didn't matter. Like, whatever flavor was around at the time, that's where we went. Now, one good thing is I got exposed to a lot. One bad thing is I got exposed to a lot. It has its pros and cons for both. We ultimately landed during my last 5 years with her on the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, what you may know as Mormon, ranch in Florida. So it was between Kissimmee St. Cloud and Melbourne. There's a huge cattle and citrus ranch out there. It may be even more now since I've been there, but that we worked on, lived on, went to church on. We bussed from there an hour into school every day, but it was our life, living on the Deseret Ranch. And so I loved my time there. Let me just say that for a moment. Like, I have reconnected with a lot of the people that I grew up with there. These people helped save me from a lot of terrible thoughts and situations. That is probably some of my most cherished time living in Florida, is my time on the Deseret Ranch. And the people that were there that just loved me. They just loved me. I am proud of the friends that I made there. I'm proud that I get to see the lives that they've created for themselves. But that was also a step in my journey that was exposed me to a lot. So when I would come up here to stay with my dad during the summers, we went to church at a missionary Baptist church in a little town outside of where I am now. That I call it the H cubed. It's the Hose, Heels, and Hymns Church, and it was foundational in a lot of my formative years of what I believed. I love, my grandmother still goes there. I am born and bred on some Heavenly Highway hymns, so I have a lot of fondness in my heart for that little church. But I also was exposed to a lot there, and I learned a lot about organized religion in all of these different facets that I've had an opportunity to be a part of in some shape, fashion, form, whatever. When I was in high school, my 11th grade year, I asked my parents because they were still driving 45 minutes from the town we lived in back to the same church that I had grown up in there. And so I asked my parents if I could go to a church with, this group of friends that I had really started doing a lot with, still friends with all of them to this day, which is really cool. But I started going to youth group there, and it was at the Assembly of God, and you learn a lot more when you expand out into assemblies and Pentecostal churches. And so the biggest thing about being exposed to all of this is that I am exposed to all of it. So that's both a pro and a con. There's a lot you're exposed to. Luckily, I was very grounded in who I was. And so I was able to take it all in and plumb line that against what my beliefs were. So I believe when I was 6 years old, I walked that aisle. I did everybody was going and doing all the things and getting baptized. Done. And I'll talk more about, I have a salvation story episode coming up. I'll talk more about how I realized that I was not and what that actually looked like. But that kind of reshaped the moment that I really had my encounter with Jesus, really reshaped. It was the defining line between all of that I had been exposed to what was about to come. Okay. I was 19 years old when that happened. And so now I'm an adult navigating adult church life on my own, and then eventually with my then husband and my children, and now as, a single woman. Navigating as an adult, helped start 2 churches. When you plant a church, you are involved in a lot of the church politics, in a lot of the leadership woes that blow hard when you know too much. It's not the same as walking into a church every day or every Sunday, sitting down, being fed and getting up and going and being who you need to be now out there. Okay. When you're in the church leadership, you learn a lot of things you never wanted to learn. But we learn there's agendas. We learn there's personalities that just don't mesh. But at the end of the day, through all of that, through the 2 church plants, through navigating the last church where I spent a bulk of my time through, and went through the divorce and went through the job loss and the suicide situation where I was exiled through all 3 of those. I was a leper through all 3 of those. We've talked about that. I realized, here's the end of the day. People are fallible. People are human. People are people. And people are who are at the core of organized religion. And we've got to remember those are people at the end of the day. So how did I go through all of that? Go through what I went through the divorce, through church plants, through hurts, through ugliness, through ugly words, to flip the script and still be in church today? How did I do that? Why have I not run from this Jesus thing, this church thing, this whatever? One, it's what I said at the very beginning. The organized religion side does not define my relationship with Jesus. Plain and simple. And I get that there's a lot of people who hate organized religion because of some of the things like I've walked through and worse. Okay? In one of the church plants, it was very evident that the leadership, it was about the leadership and not about Jesus. Girl, I'm walking away. In the church where I went through the hardest times of my life, which produced this tattoo, I literally said to the leadership of that church, if it was not for who I know that I am in Jesus and how grounded I am in that, I not only would have run from church, I would have run from God. Plain and simple. So those two, while they, the Bible says, to not forsake the gathering together of yourselves, it builds us, it edifies us, it gets us to the point of being able to go out and do the things that we have been commanded to do, okay? It still will not touch my relationship with Jesus. That's mine. That's personal. Organized religion is organized religion, but this is personal, and you can't take it from me. So that's the biggest reason. But you'll also hear, I don't use the word Christian, and I hate that because I know, so in my, apologetics class back in college, I can remember, going through things like, where that word come from, like how all that was founded and how I'm going to defend that. But that word in and of itself is, I asked a couple of people that I know do not believe, that I know do not go to church while I was getting in preparation for this episode, what does that word mean to you? This is what I got. Hypocrites, which we're all hypocrites, let's be real. Closed-minded, arrogant, and mean. I got that one back in bold letters, big bold letters. Mean. Like that's what you think of when you think of the word Christian. And so then I flipped it to, okay, do those define who I am? Like in your mind, do you see Billy as a hypocrite, closed-minded, arrogant, and mean? Like, do you see that? And their answer was no. Even though I know that I can be a hypocrite. I know I can be mean. Like, I know that that's not saying I never am. So don't hear me saying I'm Miss Perfection. So that tells me those two things are separate. And they need to be separate. There is so much swirling around in the world of Christianity today. I don't want to be defined by that. I want to be defined by my relationship with Jesus. Is my relationship with Jesus. Okay? That's not Jesus. Arrogant, closed-minded, hypocrite. That's not who Jesus is. That's not who Jesus came to be. That is not what Jesus wants for any of us that have found our life in Jesus. Like, that's not what he wants. That's not who he is. This Christianity, this banner of I'm a Christian has turned into I have a right to tell you what you're doing wrong. And that is not Jesus at all. And so my evangelical trauma has forced me to separate from that. And you may say, okay, so then why are you still going to a organized religion church? Because there's value in that for me. I have found a body of believers that I believe is where I'm supposed to be. It allows me to use my gifts for God and for moving the church forward as a whole into what he's designed us to be for the church age. And so it took me a long time, especially out of that my last evangelical trauma, where I watched my friends be destroyed by the leadership, where I was asked when I walked out of the hospital, dropping my daughter off at the behavioral hospital. Well, maybe she should come to youth on Wednesday nights. Excuse me? What? Like, how am I still able to walk through the doors of a church, period? Let alone the fact that I stayed there for a couple more months for stability as my daughter got out of the hospital, which she didn't know that for a long time. How, Billy? How are you doing that? Why? Why would you want to? Again, it's my relationship with Jesus. It's what feeds my soul is the gathering together, the worshiping together, with our mask on, socially distanced. I need it. I'm also raising my kids who need it. And since we've stepped into this last year with this church, with this body of believers, I've watched them both grow tremendously in ways I have never seen them grow. I've watched them ask questions. I've watched them lean in. And my son even goes to a different youth group that was kind of our interim while we were trying to figure out what was going on. He loves it. He wants to be there, which he's never wanted. He never wanted to be involved in something like that. So, how am I still there? I had to confront. So in all these adult evangelical trauma situations, I confronted. Now, not immediately. I sat, I prayed, I settled so that I wasn't doing anything on emotion, and I confronted. With, guys, this is what it is. This is what it is. And you can't and expect this. Like, you can't do it. I did it with as much love and as many tears, as little tears as I could. But I confront. And then I had to forgive. It took me a long time, especially for that come to Wednesday night youth group. It took me a long time to be able to literally type the words, I forgive you. But I had to. It was holding me back. No, like, they didn't have a clue. They didn't have a clue that this almost destroyed me. But it took me back to the thing that I said a little bit ago. These are they're humans. Just because they're pastors or leaders or youth group teachers or elders or deacons or whatever, they're people. At the end of the day, they are just as fallible as you and I. So let's quit putting them on pedestals, even though they do have a different accountability because they're shepherding a flock of people. I completely am with us on that. They are held to a higher standard. They really are. But that's between them and God. But as for me, this is a fallible human being just like me. And I can choose to forgive or not. And not choosing to forgive does nothing but eat away at me. And so you don't get to live rent-free in my head anymore. When I forgive you, when I forgive what's happened and I move on, you don't get to live rent-free anymore. You're taking up too much time and too much energy. Gone. And then I also had to resolve to do my part. I had to resolve to do my part of what part of this was me, what part of this was just me being in my head, and get accountability for how I'm going to not let that happen again. Right? But at the end of the day, I had to commit. I had to and have to commit to love. Love. I love the body of believers that I'm surrounded with. I love my pastors. Oh my gosh, I love my pastors. I trust their hearts. I love the youth pastor that is shepherding my son. I trust him. I have picked up the phone in tears with him. I trust these people because they've proven to me that I can trust them. And I trust the Jesus that's coming out of them. You may think I'm crazy. but I've committed to love, and I repeat. So when I get hurt, I recognize it, talk, get that accountability, and repeat. I commit to love, I repeat. I commit to love, I repeat. This may not be for everybody who's walked through evangelical trauma. I get it, I understand. But this is what worked for me, and this is where I am, and you can't take it from me. It's who I am. So, now that leads us into next week, which is probably going to be even more difficult of a discussion for some of us. And I have titled it, Does Jesus Love the Gays? Be ready. I've got to get ready. So let's all get ready for next week. But for now, have a great week. I will see you Tuesday, and we'll buckle up for a wild ride. Have a good one.